So we just want to wrap up this morning's session with a couple of administrative tasks. Could the table captain write your name and the number that's on your table on a Post-it note and stick it up in the corner of the board? Because we're going to have to move the boards. We don't want them interrupting the afternoon flow. And tomorrow morning, you will be rejoining this group of people that you've brainstormed with to take these ideas and develop them further. Okay? Table captain, write your name and table number. You can write it right on the foam core if you want, but on a Post-it note is fine too. And then as you get up for lunch, if you could go lean it over on this wall over here with the windows, you would save a bunch of folks a lot of effort. So once you've labeled your board, you can... No, they're not. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're not breaking yet. Hold on a second. Now, just to remind you, we started this session with 4 starter ideas, I called them, that David presented. These are things that feel juicy, feel like they've got some energy behind them. And what we're going to do tomorrow is take some of these ideas and either go in that direction or go against that direction. I heard some comments about, well, do we need another competition? That's a really interesting thing. Do we need another prize? That's a very legitimate issue that emerged from the brainstorming, and maybe you want to create a design solution that actually addresses that tomorrow. Okay? So just to remind you of these ideas, the Nobel-like prize, the process to help firms become a source of sustainable value, a world learning architecture to advance business and social innovation, and advancing Prime through building a new theory of the firm. Okay? Oh, we're not going to enjoy lunch, though. All right.
So I want to just join me in thanking Peter for leading us through this first phase of this design session. Thank you, Peter. Make sure that the names and the table number is on that, and that you put the boards over here because we want to pick right up with this tomorrow morning. So we're going to get into the very concrete mode of building prototypes, and I think we're going to have just a terrifically exciting session tomorrow morning. Right now, we're going to hear a couple messages, some thoughts from Peter Senge and Russ Ackoff, and let me have Ante join us. And we'll be going to lunch at about 12:30. Is that right?
Yeah,
yep.
About 12:30.
Yep.
So today, actually, you will have a full lunch. We're not going to put you on a diet today, and you actually have time to eat. So we have a special pleasure here, which is getting systems thinking even more into the room, because one of the key questions we were asked for this conference, this was in a conversation I had with Peter Senge, who couldn't be here because he couldn't be in 2 places at once. We came to the conclusion, we thought about, what if everything we were doing at this conference, brilliantly tonight, we designed technology to solve all the climate problems we had in the world. We woke up tomorrow morning, there was no climate change problems. What would have changed? That got us to thinking. It's about design, about products, but a lot more too. How do we design the way we live as human beings? Because we'll still have a lot of the same challenges we have. So therefore, I'd like to introduce Peter Senge and Russ Ackoff, who have 2 messages. We're going to start with Peter Senge first. And in brief, and both of their bios are extremely long, as you know, because they are really, I don't want to say fathers of systems thinking, but have really put a lot of thought into this, inspired a lot of us, and really helped create the fields. Peter, as many of you know, is a senior lecturer at MIT. He is the founding chair of SOL, Society of Organizational Learning. He's probably best known as being the author of The 5th Discipline, and he's given a lot of thought recently to the topics of design and sustainability. We're going to start off with that video first to explain how design thinking, in his own terms, can both link into what we're doing at the conference, but also how we organize as human beings. So we'll start off with Peter first, then I'll introduce Russ later.
So, good morning, everyone. I want to first apologize for having to speak to you through a video. I would love to have been at the conference with you all. A lot of good friends are there, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the organizers of this event. I am on a commission for the U.S. National Park Service, and it just so happened that the last meeting of our commission is occurring as you're watching this videotape. And it's a commitment I made with a group to think about the next 100 years of the U.S. national parks and the vision of how they could contribute to our society. By the way, there'll be a great show by the terrific documentary filmmaker who did the Civil War series on the national parks coming up in the fall, so that was a pitch. You didn't really need to hear that, but I just wanted you to know that I would not be there if there was not something really important. Ante Glavis has asked me to kind of reflect with you on the theme which is running through the conference of how can design thinking contribute to sustainability. I know you heard from Bill McDonough yesterday. Bill is a tremendous advocate that we really express our intentions through design. And there's been one or two other occasions where Bill and I have both spoken at conferences on this theme. I'd like to suggest first it's a theme that has actually a fair amount of kind of paradox and dilemmas built into it. And the reason is really simple. Human systems, social systems, are not engineering systems. They're not physical systems. So what does it mean to design a human system? It's really not a straightforward question at all. If you say, well, I don't like the way my family's working, it must be a bad system, let's redesign it. Other than kind of getting rid of family members, I'm not exactly sure what you would do. So I think it starts, this kind of reflection needs to start on, well, what do we mean by design in a human system? What is a human system? Now, you're also hearing from Russ Ackoff today, so I need to kind of tip my hat and do an apology even before I start. There's nobody who's thought longer about human systems and the need for a design mentality about human systems than Russ. He's been a great mentor and an inspiration to all of us. If you take the view of a human or social system, does in fact include the artifacts of the system, but even more fundamentally the habits of thought and the habits of action. What's design? I mean, can I redesign my way of seeing the world? Can I redesign my most basic habits? It's a funny word, you can see, but I think the spirit of design thinking really can still apply if we kind of keep thinking about the nature of a social system or a human system. So, yes, if you change the artifacts, things do change. Many of us have bought devices, PDAs, iPhones. All of a sudden, we develop a different set of habits. Today, a lot of young people, for example, have the habit of thought and action that they have to return every instant message they get. Where did that habit come from? Well, it didn't come from any place until there were instant messages. So when you change the artifacts, you can change the habits. Not necessarily, but you can. More importantly, though, than just the artifacts, there are two other aspects of design. One is practices. You want to learn something new. We all know this. You adopt certain practices. Practice, 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 practice. Remember that, right? The way a human being learns anything is through commitment to continual practice. So if I want to learn to play the piano, I better have some practice for learning to play the piano. If I want to learn to ride a bicycle or if I want to learn to ski, what's the most useful thing? At some level, it's having practices. So those are designed. You can design a practice. So we design practices. If you want to learn to quiet your mind, you better have some practices. It might be listening quietly to beautiful music. It might be reading and really living with a poem. It might be sitting in any form of meditation or contemplative practice. See the role of practice. Those are all designed. Probably the most subtle aspect of design, particularly in a social system, No, and arguably the most important is the design of guiding ideas. In fact, the person from whom I learned the most about design, a man named Bill O'Brien, who was a CEO of a very successful insurance company, said the first act of design, and by that he meant the most fundamental, is the design of guiding ideas. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Notice that phrase. Remember that the Declaration of Independence came 10 years in the United States before the Constitution. So you had to have a foundation of guiding or governing ideas. And then you had to find a way to how to design the mechanisms. Notice the artifacts, the mechanisms, and the practices, the ways of doing things in the organization based on those guiding ideas. So, guiding ideas, practices, artifacts. So I think when all is said and done, the key design questions for sustainability do include the artifacts. There's no doubt about it. There are some really problematic artifacts in our world today. But they ultimately are about our behavior, the practices whereby we will shift our behavior, and the guiding ideas. If I had to pick one question that to me would lead us a long way around sustainability, and which could start to shift some of the guiding ideas in present society, it's simply the question, what do we really want? What's really important to us? What does well-being represent? What's health? Personally, organizationally, societally? You see, we've stopped asking those questions. We've stopped asking what's the good life. What does progress really mean as a society? And we've substituted, it's more economic growth. Measured, by the way, by the artifact, which we understand very well, called GDP. It's just like a company. A company's in good shape if it's growing. And it makes profit, measured by the artifacts of sales growth and profits, and profit growth. You see how these things always hook together. The mental model and the artifact. You want to change the mental model, start to think about some new guiding ideas. So I'm finding more and more, as I don't particularly like the word sustainability, because I think it's not actually a very evocative guiding idea. If someone said, Bill might have even said it, because his longtime partner, Michael Braungart, used to often say, if someone asks you how your marriage is doing and you say it's sustainable, it's not exactly very encouraging. So sustainability is actually not a very evocative, very positive guiding idea. It's actually what we technically call a negative vision. It's actually a word that talks about what we don't want. We don't want to be unsustainable. Fair enough. But a guiding idea to really have impact has to evoke something. What is it that we really care about? What would it mean to live well together on the planet? What is social well-being? And what would it mean then to commit ourselves to social well-being? Now, social well-being does not just mean society and social capital. I don't think there's any example of people who live at a high level of social well-being who don't also have a sense of deep connection with the living world around them. Because you'll find if you really reflect on your sense of well-being, it almost always comes down at one level to your sense of connection. Your connection to one another, your connection to the larger living world, your connection to a larger purpose in your life. Being deeply connected, which, by the way, is not well substituted by the connectedness of this artifact, this PDA cell phone artifact. Yeah, we have a high level of connection with very low sense of connectedness today. So clearly there's a different kind of connectedness. But that's an answer to the question. In many ways, I think it's the question that matters. What really matters to us? What would it take to start to have our societies committed to what really matters to us? And then what would be the practices? So I'll just give you a real simple practice. You want to have a practice that starts to build connectedness. Concentrate on how you relate in the next conversation you have. It's really simple. How might I approach every interaction, whether it's for 2 seconds or for 2 hours, as a real opportunity to experience my own well-being and my own sense of connection to the person with whom I'm interacting? That's a practice. That's a practice that would support an experience of well-being and continually clarifying clarify what it means to have a guiding idea of social well-being. And by golly, I'm quite convinced that the artifacts would start to change. But you can start any of those places. And ultimately, in the way we've come to think about design in social systems, it has to encompass all three: the guiding ideas, the practices, and the artifacts. And so in that sense, I do think there is a way in which design thinking could contribute. In fact, I guess I could say it more strongly. Without embracing design thinking in this fashion, I don't have a clue how we're actually going to deal with the immense challenges we face in the world today, which I don't need to belabor this to an audience like is gathered here, are truly immense, and they're actually right here, right now. They're not over the next 50 or 100 years. They're in the next decade. Rajendra Pachauri, the chairman of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the person who actually received the Nobel Prize for the work of the IPCC a year and a half ago in Norway, said recently, this is the defining moment. We probably have until 2012. If we haven't really turned the world's thinking and action around climate change, it will probably be too late. Despite all the chit-chat and all the words and all the media reports about global warming and blah, 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 the facts are that the total carbon generated in the world, the CO2 emissions of the world, in 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008 were higher than the worst-case scenario of the IPCC. So we talk and talk, but we don't do. That shows you another system's at work. That shows you there needs to be a fundamental redesign of that system. And that system, by the way, is how we live. So no big deal. We just have to change the way we live. And maybe that notion of incremental change in habits, grounded in creating new artifacts and ultimately new guiding ideas, we hold these truths to be self-evident. What would these truths be like in a world that we really could be comfortable? In fact, we could really be excited. A world that would be flourishing, so we would naturally be excited about handing it to our children and our grandchildren. That's all that this sustainability stuff actually means, when the future becomes really real to us in that sense. It will be because we've started to live together differently. Yes, I think it'd be fair to say that might be a design revolution. Thank you.
The next video is from Russ Ackoff, message. Russ is often called the Dean of America's Systems Thinking Community. In other words, he's one of the people who's credited for starting operations research in the 1950s. He was the president of the Operations Research Society of America, and his book, Introduction to Operations Research, which is co-authored, is a classic. He's co-authored about 31 books and 250 articles, and is really, along with Peter, considered one of the real thought leaders in systems thinking. So it is these messages that we want to take into the rest of the design that we do for the rest of the conference. I also want to give a special thanks to Steve Brandt. Steve, are you here? So Steve, you just stand up for a quick second. Steve went to go video at Russ. Russ wasn't able to make it here, so thank you, Steve, for doing that. We can show Russ's video.
Corporations, companies, partnerships, and other kinds of enterprises are sanctioned by society, and as a result, they are defined by the role that they play in the social life that we live. In particular, these types of economic enterprises are expected to produce and distribute wealth. The production of wealth is clear enough. Their product and services are supposed to be of value to those who buy them, and a value means that they add to the wealth of those who have made the purchase. The lesser known of the two functions is the distribution of wealth. Through the payment of dividends, interest on loans, on purchases of goods and material which it pays for, and primarily for wages, it distributes wealth within society. It is the only mechanism society has to simultaneously produce and distribute wealth. Every other mechanism will distribute wealth at a cost. It does not produce wealth, it just consumes it. So it's the distribution of wealth that's the critical responsibility of a corporation. And it means that the maintenance of employment is also a very critical aspect of its function. Downsizing is the disappointment to society and with respect to a function which the corporation or company is supposed to serve. Downsizing is a abdication of a responsibility to maintain employment through which wealth gets distributed. When this much is said to a group of executives, the response that you get is perfectly predictable. What the devil do you expect us to do if we got 25,000 employees that we don't need? If we hold on to them, we'll go out of business. Is that what you're suggesting? Well, obviously not. The problem is they can only think of two alternatives. Either you keep them and go out of business, or you don't keep them, you so-called downsize. Now, if it's true that if there are only those two alternatives, you got a problem, but there's a third one. And that it comes out with executives who are concerned about the problem, feel a sense of obligation about employment, and who think their way through the problem. Now, there's another way corporate responsibility comes up. It's interesting that if you want to become a locomotive driver or an airplane pilot, or even a bus driver, you have to take a test to demonstrate your competence. But if you're going to become the executive of a corporation, you don't have to demonstrate any competence. In fact, we're well aware now, looking at what's happening to many corporations, that competence is not widely spread among corporate executives. What they don't have is an understanding of the nature of the organization, that it's a system, and as a system, it has some very essential and critical properties. Every social system, that's a system in which people have an important role, has a function which defines it. And that function is one that it performs in a larger system which contains it. But the important point is that the way a part that's essential affects the whole always depends on what other parts are doing. No part has an independent effect on the whole. Its effect on the whole depends on what other parts are doing, and therefore it's the interaction of the parts that are essential in a system, not their actions taken separately. This has a very important consequence. It means that to improve the performance of the whole, you have to improve the interactions of the parts, not the actions of the parts taken separately. In fact, it is quite possible to improve the performance of a part and thereby destroy the system. Take a simple example. Going back to a common and well-known example, the automobile. Suppose we take one of the least powered automobiles on the market, take a cheap Ford. We decide we're going to upgrade it, going to put a Rolls-Royce motor in it. Well, first of all, you can't get it in, but let's assume you can get it in by using Scotch tape and other mending devices. Would it be a better car? Of course not, because the other parts of the car are not designed to work with the Rolls-Royce motor. You would destroy the car, would not be able to run, although you put a better motor in it. The fact is that the improvement of a system occurs when the interactions are improved, not when the actions taken separately are improved, unless one is assured that that kind of improvement affects interactions in a productive and positive way. Managers in general do not understand that divide and conquer is not the way to successfully manage a system, but that's nevertheless the way we do it. Our whole society is based on breaking up the system into parts which you then try to manage separately and almost independently of each other. So the corporation is broken up at the first level between production, marketing, finance, personnel, products, geography, and so on. You divide and conquer. The effort of the executive is to make each part as profitable as possible, not realizing that effort frequently prevents the corporation from operating as well as it possibly can. Now, this has certain consequences which have to be taken into account. Best practices is a common activity of corporations today. You look at other corporations that have a function similar to yours, and if it appears to be operating more effectively than yours, you get a description of it and try to replace your system with the one that appears to perform better in another company. Well, that's not necessarily so. Why? Because a part that operates well in one system may operate in a devastating way in another system. It isn't the part's performance that's critical, it's the way the part performs with the other parts of the whole of which it is a part. And that is what should be essential in best practices approach, but it's not. In other words, the approach to management tends to be analytic. And in analysis, you take the thing you want to understand apart, try to understand each part taken separately, and then aggregate that understanding into an understanding of the whole. But that, it turns out to be absolutely ineffective in trying to explain why a system behaves the way it does or how to improve it. So understanding requires you looking at the larger system that contains the one you're trying to understand. But managers tend to do the opposite, to reduce problems to the small, cut it down to size so they can manage it easily without being aware that that gives them no understanding of the nature of the whole and how to affect it. Now, the last point I want to make is one consequence of the educational system, which involves for most managers a stint in college. We come out with the notion that the world is divided into disciplinary problems. There are physics problems, chemistry, biology, psychology, economics, production, marketing, finance, personnel, management, philosophy, religion. There are hundreds of different kinds of problems. And we act as though there are, which means that when a problem is identified in a department which is defined by a function, that it must be solved by the use of the variables which that department controls. And that's absolutely self-destructive. There are no such things as physics problems, chemistry problems, biological problems. There are no economic problems, no financial problems, no production problems. The adjective in front of the word problem tells you something, but not about the problem. Executives should realize that. One of the major inefficiencies in corporations today is that managers attempt to solve the problems that they recognize within their function by manipulating the variables under their control. And in my experience, most problems are better solved somewhere other than where they are recognized, so that a so-called marketing problem may be solved by changing the production process or the financial arrangements. The management, in other words, has to get understanding of the nature of the system and come to it full of the knowledge of how a system operates and can be made to operate better. That should be a responsibility of the manager, just as the pilot of a plane has a responsibility to all the stakeholders with regard to the knowledge that he has of the airplane that he drives. We similarly ought to have a licensing arrangement for managers, which would then assure us that they would be fulfilling their responsibilities to society.
Hoping that that's food for thought, both for lunch and for the rest of the design process. So before I hand it over to Jean for the announcements on where the workshops will take place, we do have a presentation which was, for those of you who weren't here the first evening, we had an Ethic Mark Award So in that capacity, I'd like to invite up on stage Tim O'Connor, who is a board member of the Board of Directors of the World Business Academy, the managing principal of the Zeman Group, and he's here in his function as a co-executive director of the Ethic Mark to present the Ethic Mark Award.
Thank you, Ante. We gave 2 awards on Tuesday night, if you remember, if you were there. One was for not-for-profit advertising. It's a wonderful ad by CARE, which talked about the empowerment of women and about a natural resource that hasn't been used effectively throughout the world, and if it's used more effectively, could certainly help us with many of the problems that we face day to day. We also had an award in the for-profit category, and the winner in that category was a beautiful 4-minute video by a division of Procter & Gamble, Pantene. What struck me about that ad is it was 4 minutes long, and it was only about 3 minutes and 55 seconds. Did you get into it? Did you even know that it was Pantene? And it talked about really the, if you will, the chrysalis, the butterfly in each of us, that if it's just given the opportunity, just given the chance, how that marvelous butterfly can grow and do marvelous, wonderful, transformative things in our world. And Craig Wynette was not able to be here on Tuesday night, and at this time I'd like to invite Craig up here, who you've all heard yesterday, and to accept the award on behalf of Pantene in his role at Procter & Gamble.
Well, it's here an honor to accept this on behalf of P&G, and let me just say a couple of quick things. One, how enormously gratifying it is, especially in today's world, to have a company that you can be proud of. And that's the way I felt for 20 years about P&G, and the fact that there always seems to be parts of what we do that I can be proud of, and so can 130,000 other people, that, boy, I don't take that for granted. The other thing I wanted to say is that our CEO, A.G. Lafley, and I are both big fans of Peter Drucker. In fact, the two of us spent a lot of time with Peter Drucker over the last 10 years and miss him a great deal. But one of the core ideas of Peter Drucker that AG has sure signed us up for is this whole idea of doing well by doing good. And for us, we think the basic operation of the company and what a lot of people want to call corporate social responsibility is that there's no distinction between the two, and that's the way we try to live. Thank you very much for this great honor.
Good afternoon. Good news, you're just about to go to lunch, but just a few more minutes just so I can give you some important information. So I know that there have been a lot of ideas buzzing right here, and there's a lot of things that's going on at these tables right now, and we really invite you to go back and share that with our evaluators from the Headwaters group. Just go into the interview room just across from the registration desk and just go share the ideas and inspirations and thoughts that you are having right here at the tables. It's quick, 30 seconds, a minute, and just make sure that you're sharing with us what's happening. About the evening event last night, there were a few people that still need to make their payments. We ask that you do so at the registration desk. And for those of you that have seen the journal, we have extra copies of the journal if you are interested in that, and that's also at the registration desk. Anybody that is presenting in one of the breakout sessions today, during the first 5 minutes of lunch, please meet us at the registration desk, and somebody will be able to take you to your room where you're presenting. Make sure that you're comfortable, make sure that you have everything that you need. It's during the first 5 minutes of lunch if you're presenting today. There will be a group meeting today at lunchtime here at table 1 and 2, and it is a group around schools and youth as agents of community and world benefit. So if that's something that you're interested in and passionate about, we invite you to join the group here at table 1 and 2. There has been some things dropped off at the Lost and Found. Lost and Found is also at the registration desk. There's been a Kindle dropped off there, if anybody is looking for one of those. And then I'm going to go into where you can go after lunch for your workshops. We have a lot of very interesting workshops and breakout sessions and paper sessions happening. So the first is presented by Frank Barrett from Harvard, and it is about why sustainable design requires a new kind of collaboration. And it looks at some of the challenges and the aspects of working with integrated design teams from different backgrounds and what happens when you bring these diverse backgrounds together. The next is Giving Voice to Values, which is presented by Mary Gentili from the Aspen Institute. And Mary is going to look at a new curriculum to give people the skills to actually practice values-based leadership in their different environments. The conversation about the principles for responsible management education is continuing today in it's going to be up here just now. It's continuing in the Veale multi-purpose room, and we're looking specifically today at what are the changes required in management education and how do you bring them about. So that's in Veale, the multi-purpose room, number 2. The next workshop is looking at business as a force for peace, and we're specifically looking at 2 case studies around business acting as a force for peace. Then there's a workshop happening around the World Inquiry. The World Inquiry is one of our biggest and most exciting initiatives happening in the Fowler Center. And it is a project that looks at discovering and amplifying innovations that are both beneficial for business and for society. And it's creating a dialogue around business doing well by doing good. So this workshop invites you to come in and give perspective on what you would like to see in such a dialogue. And that's happening in Olin 313. Now we've posed the question here, what if business schools looked a little bit more like design schools? And there's going to be a workshop that dives deeper into that, and looking at some of the practices happening around design thinking in management schools. And that's being presented by Roger Martin, who is the Dean of the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. The next workshop is going specifically into, gives you a really inside look into the sustainability journey in the world's largest chemical company, Dow Chemical. And you'll get an insider's perspective from Bo Miller and Adam Müller-Weiss on that, and that's happening in Nord 213. Then we have a group from the Aspen Institute for Business and Society program, and Nancy McGaw and her group is the First Movers Fellowship. Now, the First Movers Fellowship is really an innovation lab and a learning space for extraordinary social entrepreneurs that are making a change inside their companies. And you can learn directly from them what their experiences have been, and specifically looking at how to reframe problems so that you can make a change. And that's happening in White 322. For those of you that have a passion for sustainable value and want to contribute to a special edited volume on this, specifically on positive design and appreciative construction, so moving from sustainable development to sustainable value, there'll be a workshop presented by Todo Chakantri and David Cooper-Ryder and Michelle Avital, and that will be happening in Sears 350. Your pages say Sears 250, it's Sears 350. Then Jennifer McNulty, that was up here this morning from Herman Miller, will be presenting a workshop today on Herman Miller's case study around the programmable environment, and she'll be joined by Janice Birkeland from the Queensland University of Technology, who looks at eco-retrofitting. So we're looking at redesign in the built environment in this workshop. Now, we've been throwing the term design around quite a bit, and so a lot of you might be sitting with the question, so what is design thinking exactly? And there will be a workshop that takes a few different perspectives and showcases that. They'll be happening in Sears 372. We're looking at institutional perspectives, we're looking at perspectives of improvement, and we're looking at some inspiration from the theatrical methods and methodologies. Now, technology is an amazing tool, and we've been using it a lot at this forum. But the next workshop really looks at how technology can be applied as a tool for poverty alleviation and in developing countries specifically. So there's a few really phenomenal case studies that are going to be showcased in the workshop. Technology and collaboration as a tool for poverty alleviation and massive innovation. And that's happening in Series 374. Then our friends from Accenture are presenting a workshop here today, and they're specifically looking at what are the effects of climate change on end consumers and their perspectives on businesses and how this is affecting them. They did a very in-depth research study on that, and they will be presenting the findings of this and opening up a conversation about it in White 324. And the last workshop is, we have people that flew in all the way from Amsterdam to present their ideas to you. And this is Tom Cummings from the Executive Learning Partnership. And they will be looking at really capturing all the themes that are present at this conference, looking at the redesign of management education, looking at management as design, looking how managers can really be designers in their different environments, and looking at a few case studies where they've actually applied these principles in companies as well as in large systems to bring about massive innovation. So I think the only problem that we have now is to decide which one to go to, because they're all fantastic. And with that, I leave you to go to lunch and enjoy your food, and be back here exactly at 1:30 to listen to Roger Martin from the University of Toronto. Thank you, and enjoy your lunch.